Tiemann stood before the massive viewing window of the Galactic Assembly Station, staring at the holographic display that showed a small blue world, surrounded by a shimmering barrier, Earth, his ancestral home. A place he had never seen, never touched, never known. For 3,000 years, that barrier had kept Earth isolated from the rest of the galaxy, and no one could remember why. The assembly hall behind him buzzed with hundreds of voices. Representatives from 1,000 worlds debated the proposition that would change everything. Counselor Vresh, a tall amphibious being from the Quellan homeworld, raised his webbed hand for silence. His voice echoed through the chamber when he spoke. The quarantine has lasted long enough. 3 millennia of isolation serves no purpose. Earth must be incorporated into our society. We have the right to know what lies behind that barrier. Tiemann felt his stomach tighten. Something about this felt wrong, but he could not explain why. His sister Hannah had warned him before he left for the assembly. She worked as an archaeologist, digging through ancient records that most people had forgotten. She had found something in those dusty files, something that made her afraid. "The records are incomplete," she had told him 2 days ago, her face pale on the video call. "But what I found suggests the quarantine was not meant to protect the galaxy from Earth. It was meant to protect Earth from something else. Maybe from us." Admiral Kwan, the highest-ranking human in the galactic fleet, stepped forward to address the council. He was an old man with gray hair and tired eyes. His uniform carried medals from 50 different campaigns across the stars. He represented the human colonies that had spread across the galaxy over the centuries, the descendants of those who had left Earth before the barrier went up. "I must advise caution," Kwan said, his voice steady but concerned. "We know nothing about why Earth was sealed away. Our own records from that time are corrupted or missing. Until we understand the reason for the quarantine, we should not interfere." Vresh laughed, a wet burbling sound. "Fear of the unknown is not wisdom, Admiral. It is cowardice. Earth is a primitive world now. Our scans show cities frozen in development, technology barely past their industrial age. They pose no threat to anyone." The council voted. Tiemann watched the numbers appear on the central display. 67% in favor of ending the quarantine, 28% against, 5% abstaining. It was decided. The barrier would be dissolved, and the galactic fleet would make contact with Earth. Tiemann left the assembly hall and immediately called his sister. Her face appeared on his portable communicator, and she looked even more worried than before. "They voted yes," Tiemann said quietly. Hannah closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "Then we need to move fast. I found more records today, buried deep in the archive on Centauri Station. There are mentions of something called the Warden, and something called the Last Choice. Tiemann, our ancestors were terrified of something. What is the Warden? I do not know yet. But there is a phrase that keeps appearing in every fragment I find. They chose to become the shield, over and over again. They chose to become the shield." Before Tiemann could respond, alarms began to sound throughout the station. Every screen switched to emergency broadcast mode. The image that appeared made everyone freeze. The barrier around Earth was flickering. Waves of energy rippled across its surface like water disturbed by stones. Then, section by section, it began to fade. "This is impossible," someone shouted. "The barrier was supposed to take 6 months to dissolve safely. It is collapsing on its own." Tiemann stared at the image. The barrier had stood for 3,000 years without any change, and now, the moment the council voted to remove it, it was falling apart. That could not be coincidence. On Earth, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, sensors that had been silent for millennia began to activate. In underground cities that honeycombed the planet's crust, lights flickered on in chambers that had been dark for generations. Doyan, the keeper of the deep archives, felt the vibration through the floor of his small quarters. He knew what it meant. Everyone who lived in the underground cities knew what it meant. They had been trained for this moment since birth, taught the stories, shown the records, prepared for the day when the barrier would fall. He ran through the corridors to the central command chamber. where Minji was already activating ancient defense systems. She turned to him, her face grim. "How long?" Doyon asked. "The barrier is collapsing faster than our models predicted." "Maybe 6 hours. Maybe less. Is it awake?" "Not yet. But the sensors show movement in the trench. It knows something is happening." Above them, on the surface, the cities stood empty just as they had for 3,000 years. Skyscrapers covered in vines and forests. Roads cracked and overgrown. To anyone looking from space, Earth appeared abandoned, a world that had destroyed itself or simply died out. But that was intentional. Humanity had retreated underground to hide, to wait, to maintain their vigil over something too dangerous to be known. Captain Jiho prepared his small team for surface deployment. They would be the welcoming committee when the aliens arrived. They would try to explain. They would try to warn them. But he knew from the old records that powerful civilizations rarely listened to warnings from worlds they considered primitive. The Galactic fleet began moving into position around Earth, hundreds of ships, from massive battlecruisers to small scout vessels. Timon was aboard the flagship with Admiral Khan. They would be part of the first landing party. Through the ship's windows, he could see Earth growing larger, could see the blue oceans and green continents. It looked beautiful. It looked peaceful. Deep in the Mariana Trench, something vast began to stir. Seismic sensors across the planet registered the movement. In the underground cities, people stopped what they were doing and looked up, knowing what was coming. Children asked their parents if it was time. Parents nodded, tears in their eyes, and held their children close. The barrier around Earth gave one final pulse of light and then vanished completely. For the first time in 3,000 years, Earth was exposed to the galaxy. The Galactic fleet began its approach, and on every ship, sensors started screaming warnings they did not understand. Energy readings that made no sense. A presence rising from the depths of the ocean that registered as both alive and machine, both matter and energy, both one thing and millions of things all at once. Timon felt a chill run down his spine. His communicator buzzed with a message from Hana, just 3 words that made his blood run cold. "They are waking it." The landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere with Timon pressed against the window, watching clouds part around them. Stril appeared below, a city of tall buildings wrapped in green vegetation, streets empty of any movement. It looked like a place where time had stopped centuries ago. The craft set down in what had once been a landing field, now covered in grass and small trees. Admiral Kwan led the team down the ramp, his hand on his weapon but not drawing it. 20 soldiers followed, along with Timon and 3 other diplomats. The air smelled strange to Timon, cleaner than any world he had known, with scents of growing things and earth. Everything was quiet except for the wind and distant bird calls. "Spread out," Kwan ordered. "Stay alert. Look for any signs of recent habitation." They had been searching for an hour when the ground opened beneath them. Not a collapse, but a controlled opening, smooth panels sliding apart to reveal a ramp leading down into darkness. Lights flickered on in the tunnel below, warm and yellow. A voice came from speakers hidden somewhere in the walls. "Please descend. We have been waiting for you." Kwan signaled his team to defensive positions, but Timon stepped forward. "We should go? They are giving us a choice, and if it is a trap, then we were already trapped the moment we landed." They descended into the earth, and the tunnel stretched far deeper than seemed possible. The walls were smooth metal and stone, with lights running along the ceiling. After what felt like an hour of walking down, they emerged into something that made everyone stop and stare. A city. An entire city underground, spread out beneath them in terraces and levels that went down so far the bottom was lost in haze. Buildings carved from rock, streets lit by glowing panels, gardens growing under artificial suns. And people, thousands of people going about their lives, stopping to watch the strangers who had come from above. A man approached them, wearing simple clothes but carrying himself with authority. "I am Doyon," he said in perfect but oddly accented Galactic Common, keeper of the archives and hereditary warden of Earth's memory. "Welcome to New Seoul. Please come with me." We have much to discuss and very little time." They followed him through the underground city while Timon asked questions that tumbled over each other. "How long have you been down here? Why did you hide? What happened to Earth?" Doyan did not answer until they reached a large circular room with screens covering every wall. A woman waited there, wearing a military uniform. Doyan introduced her as Minji, Earth's defense coordinator. "We have lived underground for 3,000 years, Doyan said. "Maintaining our vigil, keeping our watch, waiting for this day, though we hoped it would never come." "Vigil over what?" Admiral Quan asked. Minji activated the screens and images appeared. Star maps showing a galaxy at war. Planets burning. Fleets destroying each other. Death counts in the billions. "The first galactic war," she said. "You have forgotten it, but we have not, cannot. We were there at the end, when everything was about to fall into darkness." Timon shook his head. "There has been no galactic war. The historical records go back 5,000 years with no mention of such a conflict." "Your records were sealed?" Doyan said. "By agreement of all surviving species after the war ended. The memories were too painful, too dangerous. Better to forget and start fresh. But Earth could not forget, because Earth created something during that war. Something that could not be allowed to fall into anyone's hands ever again." The screens changed, showing something rising from an ocean. At first Timon thought it was a mountain, but then he saw it move. A massive form of metal and crystal and things he could not name, pulling itself up from the depths. The image was old, the resolution poor, but the scale was clear. The thing was kilometers tall. "What is that?" someone whispered. "The Warden," Doyan said quietly. "Humanity's greatest achievement and our deepest shame. When the war was destroying everything, when it became clear that Earth would be invaded and conquered, our ancestors made a terrible choice. They built the ultimate guardian." Minji continued the explanation, her voice heavy. "The Warden is not a machine. It is not an artificial intelligence. It is millions of human minds uploaded and integrated into a biomechanical entity. Volunteers who gave up their individual existence to become a collective consciousness with one purpose. Protect Earth at any cost." Timon felt sick. "Millions of people?" "Millions who chose it," Doyan said. "They knew what they were doing. The process was agonizing. It took years. But they did it anyway because they wanted their children and grandchildren to have a future. The Warden cannot be destroyed, cannot be hacked, cannot be reasoned with or bribed or threatened. It has only one function, and it performs that function perfectly." The screens showed more images. Fleets approaching Earth, the Warden rising to meet them. Ships simply ceasing to exist, torn apart at the molecular level. Weapons fired at the Warden that simply stopped in midair and fell harmlessly into the ocean. Attempts at orbital bombardment that never reached the planet's surface. "When the war ended," Minji said, "Earth survivors faced a choice. Keep the Warden active and become conquerors ourselves, or isolate Earth to prevent its power from being used for domination. Our ancestors chose isolation. They created the barrier, retreated underground, and swore an oath that lasted 3,000 years. We would protect the Warden's sleep. We would maintain the knowledge of what it truly was. And we would wait. Wait for what?" Quan asked. "For the galaxy to forget and come looking. For someone to make the mistake of treating Earth as weak or abandoned. For the day when we would have to wake it again." As if in response to her words, alarms began blaring throughout the underground city. Minji ran to a console, her hands flying across controls. "It is happening now. Your fleet is beginning military landing procedures. The Warden interprets this as a threat." "Stop them," Quan shouted. "We need to stop the fleet." "Too late," Minji said, her face pale. "It is waking up." The screen switched to live feeds from surface cameras. The Pacific Ocean was churning, waves rising higher than any natural storm could create. Something was displacing millions of tons of water. The ocean bulged upward, and then it broke. The Warden emerged into the light for the first time in 3,000 years. Water poured off its surface in rivers as it rose higher and higher. Its body was too complex to understand, too vast to fully perceive. Metal that seemed alive, crystal formations that pulsed with light, organic matter fused with technology in ways that should not be possible. At its core, visible through translucent sections of its body, lights flickered like stars. Each light was a human consciousness, still aware. Still present after all this time. It stood in the ocean, motionless, its head above the clouds. Energy signatures radiated from it that scrambled sensors across the solar system. Every ship in the galactic fleet felt their systems struggle to cope with readings they had never encountered before. On the flagship, Timon watched through the observation window as the thing that had been millions of his ancestors stood in the Pacific Ocean and simply existed. It had not attacked. It had not moved beyond rising from its resting place. It was waiting, just as it had been designed to do. Waiting to see if Earth was truly threatened. Waiting for permission to become the shield it had always been. Captain Jiho reached the surface with his team and stood at the edge of the water, looking up at the warden. He activated his communicator and broadcast on all frequencies. Galactic Fleet, this is Earth Defense Captain Jiho. You are approaching a protected world. The entity you see before you is our guardian. It will not attack unless you give it reason to. Please withdraw to a safe distance and allow diplomatic talks to proceed. We do not want war, but we are prepared for it. Timon grabbed Quan's arm. You have to order a retreat. Right now. If anyone fires a weapon, that thing will respond. Quan was already issuing orders, but other ships in the fleet were not under his direct command. And somewhere in that fleet, Counselor Vresh was watching and making calculations about power and opportunity. High Admiral Torvin had been staring at his sensor displays for 10 minutes without moving. His reptilian features were frozen in an expression his crew had never seen before. Fear, pure, ancient fear. His clawed hand trembled as he reached for the fleet-wide communication system. All ships, he said, his voice cracking. Emergency withdrawal. Maximum speed. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage under any circumstances. His second officer turned to him. Sir, we have orders from the Council to establish orbital control. Counselor Vresh himself commanded. Vresh is a fool who does not remember, Torvin hissed. But I remember. I was young. I was just a cadet. But I remember what those energy signatures mean. That thing in the ocean is what ended the First Galactic War. Withdraw, now. But Vresh was aboard his personal cruiser, the Dominion, and he had different plans. He had spent decades accumulating power in the Galactic Council, and he saw Earth as an opportunity. A primitive world with one guardian, no matter how impressive it looked. In his mind, capturing that guardian meant controlling power beyond imagination. He opened a private channel to the 3 battleships under his direct command. Prepare orbital bombardment. Target the entity in the Pacific Ocean. We will show the Council what true strength looks like. Aboard the flagship, alarm screamed as Quan saw what was happening. Vresh, you idiot, stand down immediately. But Vresh had already given the order. 3 battleships powered up their main weapons and fired. Massive energy beams lanced down through the atmosphere, enough power to crack a planet's crust. They converged on the Warden with precision, striking its body with force that lit up the sky. The light faded. The Warden stood unchanged. The beams had not even marked its surface. For a moment, everything was silent. Then the Warden moved for the first time since rising from the ocean. It did not move quickly. It simply raised one massive arm and pointed at the 3 battleships in orbit. That was all. Just pointed, the 3 battleships stopped existing. They did not explode. They did not burn. They simply came apart, every molecule separating from every other molecule simultaneously. Where 3 massive warships had been, there was suddenly nothing but clouds of constituent atoms spreading into space. 3,000 crew members gone in less than a second, so fast they never even knew they had died. Panic erupted across the fleet. Ships broke formation trying to flee, but they found they could not. The Warden had done something to space itself around them. Every ship was trapped, held in place by forces they could not measure or understand. They could not escape. They could only wait to see what the Guardian would do next. In the underground city, Teeman had found Doyon again and demanded access to the archives. Jiwan, Earth's chief historian, led them deeper into the complex, down corridors that became older and less maintained as they descended. They reached a chamber carved from natural rock, its walls covered in screens and old-style data storage. "This is the archive of choice," Jiwan said. "Every memory, every thought, every feeling of the volunteers who became the Warden, recorded before they uploaded. We preserve this so the galaxy will know what they gave up." She activated the system, and suddenly Teeman was not just watching records. He was experiencing them. Memories flooded into him through the neural interface. He saw through the eyes of a woman named Yunji, who had been a teacher before the war. She stood in a line with thousands of others, waiting her turn to enter the upload chamber. She was terrified. She knew the process would hurt. She knew she would lose herself, would become part of something larger and lose her individual identity. But she stepped forward anyway, because her daughter was only 5 years old, and she wanted that daughter to live in a world without war. Another memory. A man named Dayan who had been a farmer. He left his fields for the last time and walked to the upload facility. His hands shook as they placed the neural connections on his head. The pain was beyond description, like being torn apart and rebuilt simultaneously. His last individual thought before merging with the collective was hoping the crops would grow well next season. Thousands of memories, millions, parents, and children and workers and soldiers and artists and scientists, all choosing to give up everything they were to become a shield for those who would come after them. The archive played them endlessly, a testament to sacrifice that few in the galaxy could truly understand. Teeman felt tears on his face. Hannah had joined them through a remote connection from the flagship, and he could hear her crying too. These were their ancestors. People who had walked on this world and looked at the same stars and then made an impossible choice. "They are still aware," Jawan said quietly. "Inside the Warden, every consciousness is still there, still experiencing every moment. For 3,000 years they have been awake and aware, bound together in that form, unable to separate, unable to rest. They continue because their purpose continues." On the flagship's bridge, Admiral Kwan was trying to establish communication with the Warden. Every attempt failed. The entity did not respond to any signal, any frequency, any format of message. It simply stood in the ocean, keeping the fleet trapped, waiting. Then a message came from Earth, not from the military channels, not from official sources. A single consciousness had separated temporarily from the Warden's collective, something that required enormous effort and caused it pain. The signal was weak and distorted, but the words were clear. "I am Elder Myung. I was a council member of Earth when we created the Warden. I volunteered to be among the first uploaded. I speak now because I must make you understand. We are still here, still aware, still remembering every moment of 3,000 years. We cannot die. We cannot sleep. We can only protect. Please, do not make us destroy you. We do not want more death. We have seen too much death already." The message cut off. The effort of maintaining individual identity separate from the collective had been too much. Myung's consciousness dissolved back into the whole, but the words remained. Vresh, aboard the Dominion, was not moved. He had survived the destruction of his 3 battleships because his ship had been positioned further back. Now he was desperate, his plans collapsing. He opened the channel to Torvin. "You are High Admiral. Order the fleet to attack in unison. Concentrated fire on a single point. We can overwhelm it." Torvin's response was cold. "You have killed 3,000 people today, Vresh. You will kill no more on my watch. I am ordering your arrest for unauthorized military action." But Vresh was already launching his escape. The Dominion broke away from the trapped fleet, its experimental drive allowing it to slip through the Warden's containment field. It accelerated toward the edge of the solar system, running for the hyperspace boundary, the Warden noticed. It turned its massive head to track the fleeing ship. For a moment, nothing happened. Then space itself seemed to fold, and the Dominion simply stopped. Its engines were still running at full power, but it was not moving. The Warden had reached across millions of kilometers and frozen it in place, but the Warden did not destroy the ship. It did not kill Vresh and his crew. It simply held them there, trapped, unable to escape, but unharmed. A demonstration of power tempered by restraint. A message that said, "We could kill you all, but we choose not to." Hannah was frantically searching through the archive when she found something that made her gasp. "Timon, there's more. The Warden is not just defensive. Listen to this." She played a recording from the original design documents. A scientist's voice explained, "The Warden has been programmed with one absolute rule. It will defend Earth against any existential threat, but it will use minimum necessary force. It does not want to kill. The consciousness within it remembers what it is to be mortal, to be vulnerable. It will only destroy what it must, and nothing more. This is our final gift to the galaxy. A guardian that has compassion even in its terrible power." In orbit, the trapped fleet waited. On Earth, Doyon watched his displays and prayed to gods he did not believe in. And in the Galactic Council chambers, light years away, representatives were finally accessing the sealed archives from the First Galactic War, reading the warnings their ancestors had left, understanding too late what they had awakened. The standoff continued for 3 days. The Galactic Fleet remained trapped in Earth's orbit, unable to move but unharmed. The Warden stood in the Pacific Ocean like a mountain of living metal in consciousness, motionless except for the slow pulse of light from the millions of minds within it. No one knew what would happen next. In the underground city of New Seoul, President Sora convened an emergency council. She was a small woman with gray hair and steady hands, elected 5 years ago to lead Earth's hidden government. Now she faced a choice that would define the future of her world and perhaps the entire galaxy. "We have 3 options," she said to the gathered leaders. "First, we can order the Warden to destroy the fleet and establish Earth as the dominant military power in the galaxy. Second, we can negotiate a peace and ask the Warden to stand down. Third, we can do nothing and see what the galaxy decides to do next." Commander Hyen, the ranking military officer, spoke first. His voice was hard, shaped by years of training for a war he hoped would never come. "We should strike now while we have the advantage. The galaxy came to our world uninvited. They attacked our guardian. We have the right to defend ourselves, and we have the power to make sure no one threatens us ever again. The Warden can take us to every hostile world and neutralize their militaries before they can respond. We could enforce peace across the galaxy." Minji shook her head. "That is conquest, not defense. We would become the very thing our ancestors sacrificed themselves to prevent." "Our ancestors sacrificed themselves to protect Earth," Heian argued. "Let us honor that sacrifice by making Earth safe forever." Doyon stood slowly, his old bones creaking. "I have been the keeper of the archives for 40 years. I have read every record, every memory, every fragment of history we preserved. I know what the volunteers wanted. They did not want Earth to conquer. They wanted Earth to survive. There is a difference." On the flagship, Timon was working with a young Earth engineer named Bauman. Despite the tension, despite the fear, Bauman had an idea. "The Warden does not respond to our communications because it is not designed to talk. It is designed to protect. But what if we could interface with its consciousness directly? What if we could ask it what it wants?" "Is that possible?" Timon asked. "Maybe. The neural architecture is 3,000 years old, but the principles are the same. I have been studying the archives. I think I can build a bridge." They worked for 30 hours straight, building a communication system from parts they scavenged from ship systems and Earth technology. Admiral Kwan gave them whatever they needed, because he was desperate for any solution that did not involve more death. While they worked, the galaxy was changing. The Galactic Council had opened the sealed archives from the First Galactic War, High Admiral Torvin had transmitted his memories of that ancient conflict to anyone who would receive them. The truth was spreading, and it was terrifying. The war had lasted 80 years. 50 billion sentient beings had died. Entire species had been rendered extinct. Planets had been burned to lifeless rocks. The fighting had only stopped when Earth deployed the Warden, and fleets that had been winning suddenly found themselves unable to approach the Sol system. The war powers had eventually agreed to peace because continuing to fight meant eventually confronting that Guardian, and no one was willing to do that after the war. The survivors had agreed to seal all records of the conflict and start fresh. The trauma was too deep, the memories too painful. Better to forget and build something new. But Earth had never agreed to forget, because Earth carried the memory in the form of the Warden itself. Now the galaxy was remembering, and with memory came fear. Some called for Earth to be left alone forever. Others wanted the Warden destroyed before it could be used against them. A few suggested that Earth be honored and respected as the world that had ended the worst war in galactic history. Bowman finally finished the communication bridge. It was a crude thing, cobbled together and held by magnetic clamps and prayer. "This should work," he said, though he did not sound entirely confident. "In theory, what will happen when we activate it?" Tiemann asked. "You will be connected directly to the Warden's consciousness. You will experience what it experiences. Be warned, it is not a single mind. It is millions of minds thinking as one. The sensation will be overwhelming." Tiemann volunteered before anyone else could. Hannah protested from her position on the flagship, but he had already made his decision. "These are our ancestors. Someone from their family line should be the one to speak with them." They placed the neural interface on his head. Bowman activated the system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then Tiemann gasped as his mind was pulled into something vast and ancient. An impossibly complex dot. He was standing in an endless space filled with lights. Each light was a person, a consciousness, a human being who had given up their individual existence but retained their awareness. They recognized him. They welcomed him. They showed him what 3,000 years felt like when you could not sleep, could not rest, could only wait and watch and protect. The loneliness was crushing. The boredom was eternal. But worse than either was the guilt. The Warden remembered every ship it had destroyed, every person it had killed in defense of Earth. It remembered their faces, their names, their last thoughts. It carried the weight of necessary violence and hated itself for being necessary. "We want to stop," the collective consciousness told him, speaking with millions of voices in harmony. "We want to rest. We have been awake for so long, but we cannot abandon our duty. If we release ourselves, if we dissolve this form, Earth will be vulnerable. We made a promise 3,000 years ago, and that promise has not expired. What if Earth was safe?" Tiemann asked. "What if the galaxy agreed to leave Earth alone, to respect its sovereignty?" "Then we could rest," the Warden said, and Tiemann felt the desperate hope in those words. "But the galaxy must prove it will honor such an agreement. We have seen too many broken promises, too many betrayed trusts. We cannot risk Earth on mere words." Tiemann withdrew from the connection, gasping and crying. Hannah was at his side immediately, holding him while he shook. "They want to be released," he whispered. "They are so tired. But they will not abandon us." Admiral Kwan had been listening to the conversation through monitors. Now he made a decision that would cost him his career but save countless lives. He opened a channel to Earth and to the entire galactic fleet. "This is Admiral Kwan, Commanding Officer of the Third Fleet. I am hereby ordering all ships under my command to power down weapons and assume non-threatening postures. Furthermore, I am proposing to the Galactic Council that Earth be granted special protected status, with full sovereignty and the right to maintain its guardian as a defensive measure. Earth has not attacked us. It has only defended itself. We came to their world uninvited. We fired first. The fault is ours." Vresh, still trapped aboard the Dominion at the edge of the solar system, tried to broadcast a protest. But his communications were cut off. Torvin had finally had enough of the counselor's interference. Vresh, you are under arrest for murder and unauthorized military action. When this crisis ends, you will face trial. Until then, you will be silent. On Earth, President Sora received Kwan's proposal. She called for a vote from her council. The debate lasted hours. Hyan argued for using the Warden to enforce Earth's security. Others argued for trusting the galaxy's offer. Finally, Sora called for the decision. The vote was close, but mercy won over fear. Earth would accept the galaxy's offer of peace and protected status. The Warden would not be used as a weapon of conquest. Bowman sent the message directly to the Warden's consciousness. The massive entity received the information and processed it across millions of minds simultaneously. Then, slowly, it began to construct something in Earth's orbit. Defensive platforms appeared, grown from asteroids that the Warden converted into protective stations. They spread around Earth in a perfect sphere, autonomous guardians that would protect the planet even if the Warden itself was dormant. The construction took 6 hours, and when it was complete, the Warden had ensured that Earth would be safe even while it rested. Then it sent a message to all ships. You may leave now. You are free. Do not return unless invited. The containment field dissolved. The trapped fleet was released. Ships began moving immediately, eager to escape from the presence of something that had shown them just how fragile their power truly was. Within hours, the only galactic vessels remaining in the system were those commanded directly by Kwan, who had been given permission to stay and begin proper diplomatic relations. 6 months had passed since the Warden rose from the Pacific Ocean. The galaxy had changed in that time, though the changes were subtle and would take years to fully unfold. Earth was now a member of the Galactic Conclave, but with special status. No military vessels could approach within 1 light year without permission. No demands could be made of Earth, no interference in its governance would be tolerated. The defensive platforms in orbit served as a constant reminder of what would happen if anyone forgot these rules. Teeman had accepted the position of Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Assembly. He spent his days in meetings with representatives from 1,000 worlds, explaining Earth's history, negotiating trade agreements, building relationships. It was exhausting work, but it felt important. His sister Hannah had returned to Earth and established the Institute for Advanced Consciousness Studies, dedicated to understanding the Warden and ensuring nothing like it would ever need to be created again. The Warden still stood in the Pacific Ocean, but it was different now. Its lights pulsed more slowly. The energy readings were lower. It was entering a dormant state, a kind of sleep that allowed the consciousness within to rest while maintaining basic awareness. President Sora had promised the galaxy that Earth would never use the Warden offensively, and she meant to keep that promise, but there was one final matter to address. The volunteers who had become the Warden deserved something more than eternal duty. They deserved a choice. Doyan had spent the 6 months working with Bowman and a team of Earth's best engineers and neuroscientists. Together, they had developed a process that might allow the Warden's consciousnesses to be separated and restored to individual existence. It was experimental, risky, and would take decades to complete even if it worked. But it offered hope. President Sora stood at the edge of the Pacific Ocean with her council, Teeman, Hannah, Admiral Kwan, and hundreds of others who had been part of the crisis. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. The Warden rose from the waves before them, smaller than it had been during the confrontation, but still impossibly large. "We have gathered today," Sora said. Her voice amplified to reach everyone present and broadcast to the watching galaxy, to offer the Warden a choice. "You have protected us for 3,000 years. You have sacrificed everything. Now we ask, what do you want?" The response came through speakers Bowman had set up, translating the collective consciousness into words everyone could understand. The voice was strange, masculine and feminine simultaneously, old and young, singular and plural. "We want to rest," the Warden said. "But we cannot abandon Earth. That was our promise. That promise is all we have." "Earth is safe now," Sora replied. The galaxy has agreed to leave us alone. Your orbital platforms will protect us if anyone attacks. You have fulfilled your promise. We release you from your duty." There was a long silence. The warden's lights flickered in patterns too complex to follow. The millions of minds within were debating, discussing, deciding together what they wanted after 3,000 years of unity. "We are afraid," the warden finally said. "We have been one thing for so long, we do not know if we can be many things again. What if separation is death? What if we cannot remember who we were?" Yuan stepped forward. "We have your memories. Every thought, every feeling, every moment of your lives before you uploaded. The archive of choice preserves everything. We can help you remember. And if we choose to remain as we are, then we will honor that choice," Sora said. "But please let us try. Let us give you back yourselves, piece by piece, consciousness by consciousness. It will take time. It may take generations. But you deserve the chance to be individuals again, to live and love and experience the world as more than guardians." The warden's lights pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed. "We cannot all separate. Some of us must remain to maintain the connection, to keep the platforms running, to be ready if Earth needs us again. But perhaps some of us could be released. Perhaps some of us could remember what it is to be human." "Then let us begin," Sora said. Bowman activated his equipment. The process would be slow and careful, extracting one consciousness at a time from the collective, restoring it to an individual state, giving it a new body grown from its original genetic material. The first volunteer from within the warden was Elder Myung, who had spoken to the fleet during the crisis. The extraction took 3 hours. Everyone watched in silence as the lights within the warden shifted and changed, as one small part of that vast consciousness slowly separated from the whole. At the end, a body lay in a medical chamber, breathing but unconscious. The neural patterns matched the records perfectly. Myung would wake in a few days, restored to individual existence after 3,000 years. "It worked," Bowman whispered. Hardly believing it himself, the warden spoke again. And for the first time since its creation, there was something like joy in its voice. "It worked. We felt Myung separate. We felt him become himself again. The connection remains, but he is free. He is individual. He is alive." "Then we will continue," Sora said. "One by one, as fast as we can safely manage. We will return all of you to yourselves." "No," the warden said. "Not all of us. Some of us choose to remain. We have been one for so long, we do not wish to be divided. We have found peace in our unity, but we would like to sleep. To rest and dream, knowing Earth is safe, knowing our companions are being freed. Is this acceptable?" "It is more than acceptable," Sora said. "It is perfect." Over the following weeks, the warden began its long sleep. It withdrew back into the Mariana Trench, settling into the place it had rested for millennia. The lights within it dimmed to barely visible glows. The defensive platforms remained active, but the warden itself became dormant. Its consciousness resting in a way it had not been able to for 3,000 years, the extraction process continued. One consciousness per week, carefully separated and restored. Elder Myung woke on the 5th day, confused and disoriented but alive. He cried when he realized he could move his own body again, make his own decisions, be himself. Other volunteers followed. A teacher named Yunji, who wept with joy when she learned her daughter's descendants were still alive. A farmer named Dae-yun, who wanted nothing more than to see if crops still grew the same way. Parents and children and workers and soldiers, all coming back to individual existence, all given a second chance at life. Not all of them chose to return. Some consciousnesses had been part of the collective so long they no longer remembered how to be separate. For them, the unity was comfortable, familiar, home. They chose to remain as part of the sleeping warden, keeping watch in their rest, ready to wake if Earth ever needed them again. Teeman stood with Hannah at the edge of the ocean 3 months after the sleep began. They watched the bioluminescence from the warden's resting place, a gentle glow in the depths that reminded everyone what lay beneath. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Hannah asked. I think we did the only thing, Tiemann replied. They gave up everything for us. The least we could do was give them a choice. Some in the galaxy are still afraid. They think the Warden might wake up and decide Earth should rule everyone. Tiemann shook his head. That fear is why the Warden exists. Earth had the power to conquer the galaxy 3,000 years ago. We had it 6 months ago. We have it now. But we chose not to. That choice means more than any weapon ever could. At the Galactic Assembly, a new law had been passed, unanimous for the first time in recorded history. No species would ever create a guardian like the Warden again. The cost was too high, the sacrifice too terrible. The Warden would stand alone. A reminder of what desperation could drive beings to create and why such desperation must be prevented. Captain Jiho took Tiemann on a tour of the memorial that had been built in New Seoul. It was a wall of names. Stretching for kilometers, every volunteer who had become part of the Warden listed in alphabetical order. Millions of names carved into stone, lit by eternal flames. Visitors came every day to touch the names, to remember, to thank people who had given up their existence so others could live. My great-great-grandfather is on this wall, Jiho said, pointing to a name. He was a doctor. He volunteered because he wanted to heal the world by protecting it. I grew up knowing that part of him was in the Warden, aware and watching over us. Now his consciousness is being prepared for extraction. In a few months he will wake up. I will get to meet my ancestor. What will you say to him? Jiho smiled. Thank you. That is all. Just thank you. The sun set over the Pacific Ocean, and deep in the Mariana Trench the Warden dreamed. It dreamed of the volunteers waking up, of individual lives being restored, of the day when its purpose would finally be complete. It dreamed of Earth safe and prosperous, of a galaxy at peace, of the children of those who had sacrificed being able to live without fear, and in its dreams, the millions of consciousnesses that remained within the collective sang together, a song of hope and memory and eternal vigilance. They would rest, but they would not disappear. They would sleep, but they would not abandon their promise. Earth's forgotten protector had awakened, and now it could rest. Knowing it had done its duty and done it well, the galaxy would remember the Warden not as a weapon, but as a testament to what people would sacrifice for those they loved.